A great story, we have to beat this to death because the story is the same every month. We're now in what will be the hottest year on record, easily. This is, if you saw Dr. Mann's presentation, you saw something a bit like this. I just added the star from what 2015 is going to be. 2014 was the hottest year on record, right there, and 2015 is going to blow it out. It's not even going to be close. There's a good chance, by the way, that 2016 will be 2015. That's the way it is when you throw an El Nino on top of the underlying global warming trend. Literally every single month it is another story, and I write the story when the NASA data comes out, and I write another piece when the NOAA data comes out, because they use different charts, and NOAA actually comes out with a report saying, it's the hottest month on record, it's the hottest rolling 12 months on record, and it's even more likely that by the end of the year it'll be the hottest year on record. So this is, it's just a big story. One has to figure out how to say it. It's, happens to be coincidental with the big lead up to the Paris climate talks. But yes, this is a blowout year. Anybody, for a while, the climate science deniers were trying to draw a line from the last big El Nino over to 2002 and 2003, which were La Niñas, and therefore slightly cooler than normal, and saying, oh, look, see, no warming from 1998 till 2001, 2002, and 2003. And because they're really good at messaging, and the main essence of messaging is simply repeating yourself over and over and over again and staying on message, the mainstream media picked it up. The scientific community started writing papers about the hiatus and the pause. And as you can see, there's no such thing. And not only isn't there any such thing as a pause, the only thing that, from the scientist's point of view, the only reason this was an interesting story is because the models had predicted we would accelerate warming. So if you talk to most of the scientists who wrote about the pause or the hiatus, they'll tell you, oh, we just meant we weren't hitting what the models said. Not that there was an actual pause in warming. There was a pause in the rate of warming, in the rate of acceleration of warming. We just had a flat velocity. So we should be, and we're now seeing, particularly if 2016 goes up here, that we're catching up to what we were supposed to do. We're going to see very rapid warming over the next 10 or 15 years. It is going to change the entire discussion because what we've seen in the last 10 or 15 years are just will be more severe in the next 10 or 15 years, and then it will be sort of increasingly obvious where we're going. So lots of stories for the next 18 months on exactly what all of this heat and record-breaking means. If you saw, I don't want to go through a lot more of the sea level rise stuff. If you saw, I comment in the morning. For me, the interesting story, and what I tried to do in climate change, what everyone needs to know, is take the politics out and just say, you need to know about climate change because it's going to change your family's life over the next 25 years as much as the internet did in the last 25. And the people who know, if you could have known 25 years ago what was to come, you would be in great shape today. And we do know over the next 25 years what's to come. And if you could, those who know are going to be the smart money. And a classic example is the inevitable crash of coastal property values. If you just take together all the presentations you heard today, there's simply no question that we're in a coastal property bubble. And the bad news is that every single one of us in the room is going to bail out the National Flood Insurance Program when the big one hits, let's say, South Florida. And it's a $50 to $100 billion of damages. The state can't cover it. The insurance companies, by and large, aren't insuring it already. You and I are to the tune of $500 billion, almost 500, Florida, $484 billion. That's in 2013, of over $1.2 trillion in inflated costs. Because if the federal government didn't do it, no one would be living in coastal property because you certainly can't get a real insurer to do it. The other thing that we're doing to inflate coastal property is every time there's a storm, the federal government pays 2/3 of the costs to put the sand back on the beach, the replenishment costs. If we stop doing that, there was a study, coastal properties would drop 15 to 25% right away. So at some point, boom, it may be the next big storm, it may just be when the smart money realizes this makes no sense, it may be when the banks say, I'm not going to write a 30-year mortgage for someone who's going to go underwater, literally. And so what I'm going to do is not write 30-year mortgages anymore, which means the price of people who buy coastal property will be doing it on a cash basis. And they'll be owning it until it's destroyed in a storm because no one else is going to be buying it. So this whole, it's the smart money will get out of coastal property before your middle class type people, at least the people who aren't informed on climate change. And maybe they will, as one climate scientist said, sell their property to deniers. But I suspect that most of the deniers actually know the reality and won't be buying coastal property. The other thing, which I've written a lot about, and just simply doesn't get enough attention, although because of California it is, this country is going to dry up, as is about a third of the habited and populated and arable land of the planet, on the business as usual case, turns into a level of soil aridity comparable to the Great Dust Bowl. -3. This is what the Great Dust Bowl in the United States averaged for about 8 years. There were spikes up to -6. This is soil moisture. You can Google it, the Palmer Drought Severity Index. And it's a measure of soil moisture, which is to say how much it rains versus how much it evaporates. So if precipitation didn't change at all, simply being hotter means more evaporation. And that means you're drying out the soil. But when you add the fact that climate change also shifts the dry zones up, then you get what is the equivalent of Dust Bowl conditions simply become the normal climate. And I was trying to find a new spin on the story, so I was just commenting on this. We all know how welcoming this country is to our neighbors from the south when they want to come into this country. How much more welcoming will be when our own pollution will have rendered their land uninhabitable? Of course we'll welcome them. If you're smoking in bed and you burn down your neighbor's home, of course you're going to help them find a new home. So of course we will help the 180, 150 million people find a new home. The solution side I spent half my life on, and I talk a lot about in the book. Unbelievable stories. The challenge for the media is it's very hard to sell a good news story to the media. It always has. It was when I was at the Department of Energy. It's getting a little better today, but this is stunning. A 99% drop in price for solar photovoltaic panels in the last quarter century. By the way, it's dropped another 30 or 40% just in the last few years. This curve can be seen in wind, it can be seen in batteries. The battle between Tesla and Apple for the car of the future, the electric car of the future, is just another great story. And electric cars are going to be the future. And so there's all these tremendous success stories. Of course, China wants to be the leader in batteries too. So story after story. And the irony is, I think you heard earlier today about the German experience and how they've spent massive amounts of money and become a leader in solar energy. And the irony is, in Germany, not exactly a sunny place. A northern climate, often cloudy. Literally, Nevada, this country, large parts of this country get twice as much sunlight in a year as Germany. And yet they surpassed us. That was a policy decision. Paris is coming up. Again, lots of interesting stories. I can't go into it now, but the media has been very, very confused about what Paris is going to accomplish. All the pledges amount to about 3.5 degrees centigrade warming. The no action, I put it in parts per million CO2 for reasons that will become clear, but we we are quite far from the 2 degree centigrade path. And so going from what Paris will give us to the 2 degree centigrade path is going to be a great challenge. The interesting thing about about CO2, and this is the last big story that I wanted to leave you with. How many people noticed the change in the air quality in this room during the course of our time here? It got better. It got noticeably better. It was stifling in the first hour or two, and it got much better. It, in fact, got 100 parts per million better of CO2. And Harvard School of Public Health came out with a study which did not get enough attention, which found that CO2 directly affects human cognition and decision making at levels that you and your kids are routinely exposed to in homes, offices, cars, airplanes, and so on. This is just 4 of the charts. This is a cognitive function test that was done by people with and without various levels of CO2. And they ran it at 500, 950, and 1500. Although, as you can see, in the middle here is 750. So many of the measures, although the average was 950, many of them were down at 700, 800, and they found a linear relationship. This is basic activity level versus CO2. This is information usage versus CO2, and this is strategy versus CO2. This is not the only study that found this. In fact, this confirmed a Lawrence Berkeley National Lab study, which I uncovered while I was researching this book, which is why I got into it very deeply. NASA has also confirmed this, and they've lowered the CO2 level in the International Space Station. Spent some time talking to the lead flight surgeon for the International Space Station in charge of the impact of gases like CO2. So this is like 5 stories. I've written 2. I'm going to write one. We have known for a long time that CO2 levels, that ventilation rates correlate with test scores of kids in school. But we have always thought that the ventilation rate was simply a measure of bad indoor air quality generally. VOCs, particulates, and everything else. Nobody suspected it was CO2 because CO2 doesn't have gross physiological impacts until you get to 5, 6, 7, 8,000 parts per million. But as it turns out, we now know that CO2 does. That's why this British expert I spoke to strongly recommended, he was hired by the British government to go into schools, measure their CO2 levels, and do tests on the students. He thinks there should be a CO2 monitor in every school. And ultimately, I'm certain that there will be. It's going to take a little while for this story to trickle out. But this is one of the biggest public health stories that there is. So the point is, and the interesting is the first study on this came out 2 years ago, got no attention because the people doing it were all indoor air quality people who really don't know how to market a bigger story, public relations-wise. So there are a lot of stories out there, and they just require having a lot of contacts, doing the legwork, talking to scientists. The more climate, I always say, the more climate scientists you talk to, the better your story will be. And one can always tell a lousy story by the number of the lack of climate scientists quoted in it. And 95% of the stories that people consider to be dreadful in the science community, whether they're scientists or science writers, are stories that are based on like one person and one study, and not talking to a lot of people. So I think that like I said, this is the story of the century. You've realized it ahead of the curve, so congratulations. And I will just end there, and I'm happy to take questions, and obviously there are other people in the audience who can speak to this.